It is April 26, 1986, in the heart of Soviet Ukraine. Nestled beside the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin Nuclear Power Plant, better known as Chernobyl, lies the city of Pripyat. Pripyat wasn't just a city. It was a symbol of Soviet modernity and progress, a young town built specifically to house the plant's workers and their families. Its streets were clean, its buildings modern, its parks lush, and the average age of its inhabitants was just 26. They viewed the 4 nearby nuclear reactors as a source of pride and power, the energy that would illuminate their future. They did not know that a sleeping monster was about to awaken in reactor number 4, and that their peaceful night would be their last. On that ill-fated night, engineers in reactor number 4 were preparing to conduct a routine safety test. However, delays pushed the test several hours back, handing it over to a less experienced night shift crew. The test aimed to determine if the steam turbines could provide enough power to run the reactor's coolant pumps during an external power outage until the backup diesel generators kicked in. But a cascade of catastrophic errors, blatant violations of safety protocols, and critical design flaws in the Soviet RBMK reactor conspired to turn this safety test into a disaster. To conduct the test, engineers disabled several vital safety systems and drastically reduced the reactor's power output. When they tried to raise it again, the reactor entered an unstable and dangerous state. Far too many boron control rods, which slow the nuclear reaction, were withdrawn from the reactor core in a desperate attempt to increase power. At precisely 1:23:40 a.m., as the actual test began, a massive, uncontrolled power surge occurred within the reactor. Realizing the danger, the engineers pressed the emergency shutdown button, known as AZ5. But here lay a fatal design flaw of the RBMK reactors. The tips of the control rods were made of graphite. As the rods began to re-enter the neutron-rich core, these graphite tips momentarily increased the nuclear reaction instead of immediately stopping it. Those few moments were enough. The immense surge in heat and pressure resulted in a massive steam explosion that completely destroyed the reactor core. Seconds later, a second, more powerful explosion, believed to be a hydrogen explosion, blew the 2,000-ton protective lid off the reactor, obliterated the roof of the building, and ejected chunks of radioactive graphite and glowing nuclear fuel into the surrounding air. The heart of a nuclear inferno was ripped open to the world. In the initial minutes and hours, chaos, confusion, and denial reigned. Local firefighting units rushed to the scene, believing they were dealing with a conventional roof fire. They were unequipped to handle the deadly radiation and were not informed of the true nature of the event. They climbed onto the collapsed roof, amidst highly radioactive graphite blocks, absorbing lethal doses of radiation as they fought the fires. These men were heroes in every sense of the word. They prevented the fire from spreading to the adjacent reactor number 3, but they paid the ultimate price. Many began suffering symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, ARS, within hours: nausea, vomiting, horrific radiation burns. Many would die in agony in the following weeks. Meanwhile, surviving plant engineers bravely fought inside the ravaged building, desperately trying to understand what happened and secure what they could, exposing themselves to unimaginable levels of radiation. Among the most famous stories is that of the 3 divers who volunteered to dive into the radioactive water beneath the reactor to open drainage valves, preventing a second, larger explosion that could have wiped out a large part of Europe. For a long time, it was believed they died shortly afterward, but it was later discovered that at least 2 of them lived for many years after the incident. Despite the obvious catastrophe, Soviet authorities initially attempted to cover up the scale of the disaster, influenced by the Cold War culture of secrecy. The residents of Pripyat were not informed of the danger until it was far too late. Children continued to play in the streets. Weddings took place, all while an invisible, deadly enemy permeated the air, soil, and water. The order to evacuate Pripyat only came more than 36 hours after the explosion, after monitoring stations in Sweden detected high radiation levels and forced the Soviet Union to admit an accident had occurred. Pripyat's approximately 50,000 residents were told the evacuation was temporary and to pack only essential belongings. They never returned home. Pripyat became a ghost town, frozen in time at the moment of the disaster. An enormous, unprecedented containment and cleanup operation began. Hundreds of thousands of people, soldiers, engineers, miners, pilots, scientists, and others, were drafted into what became known as the Liquidators. These men and women risked their lives and health to bring the catastrophe under control. Pilots dropped thousands of tons of sand, boron, and led onto the exposed reactor core to try and extinguish the fire and absorb radiation. Miners dug a tunnel beneath the reactor to prevent molten nuclear fuel from contaminating groundwater. Soldiers, dubbed biorobots, ran onto the highly contaminated roof of the plant to manually clear radioactive graphite debris, working in extremely short bursts to avoid lethal doses. A massive, hastily constructed concrete shell, known as the sarcophagus, was built over the destroyed reactor to contain the remaining radiation. The Liquidators paid a heavy price for their heroism, with many suffering severe long-term health problems, including cancer. Subsequent investigations revealed that the disaster resulted from a combination of critical design flaws in the RBMK reactor and human negligence, including gross violations of safety procedures. The disaster contaminated vast areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, and affected large parts of Europe. The number of direct and indirect deaths caused by Chernobyl has been debated for years, but the health, psychological, environmental, and economic impacts have been immense and are ongoing. A vast exclusion zone, covering approximately 2,600 square kilometers, 1,000 square miles, was established around the plant and remains in place today. Paradoxically, this zone, while still dangerously radioactive in places, has become an unexpected haven for wildlife. It has also become a destination for dark tourism. To secure the site long-term, a massive new structure, the new safe confinement, was built and slid over the decaying original sarcophagus, completed in 2019.